So how exactly do we teach a computer to tell the difference between two things? Today, we're going to dive into a really classic, really powerful technique for doing just that. It's called Gaussian discriminant analysis.
Let's make this super simple. Imagine you've got a bunch of apples and oranges. For each one, you measure two things: its weight and how red it is. You plot all those points on a graph. You'd probably see a cluster of apple points over here and a cluster of orange points over there. So the real puzzle is, how do we draw a line, a boundary, between those two clusters? How do we do it so that the next time a new piece of fruit comes along, we can say with confidence, yep, that's an apple?
All right, here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll cover the basic idea of how machines even make these classifications. Then we'll talk about a simple rule: the highest score wins. After that, we'll get into the cool part: modeling our data as data clouds. The real fun begins when we see how tiny changes in our assumptions create three totally different kinds of boundaries. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with a big takeaway.
When you strip it all down, this entire method is actually based on a really intuitive idea. It's basically a little competition.
We use something with a kind of scary-sounding name, a discriminant function. But don't let the name fool you. All this is a rule for calculating a score. So for that new piece of fruit, we calculate a score for apple and a score for orange. Whichever class gets the higher score wins. That's it. That's our prediction. Simple as that.
Now, you might be asking, okay, how do we get that score? Well, there are a few ways to do it, but we're going to zero in on the one at the bottom, the log posterior. And why that one? Honestly, it's for a super practical reason. Taking the logarithm just makes all the math that follows way easier. It turns messy multiplications into nice, clean additions, which you'll see is a lifesaver.
Now, to build this whole scoring system, we have to start with a big idea, an assumption about what our data looks like. We're going to assume that if you plotted all the points for, say, all the apples, they'd form a sort of cloud.
And more specifically, we assume it's a Gaussian cloud. That's just a fancy term for a bell curve, but in more than one dimension. Now, every one of these clouds has two properties we care about. First, the mean, which is just the dead center of the cloud. And second, the covariance, which tells us about the cloud's shape. Is it a perfect circle, or is it stretched out into an oval, and which way is it pointing?
Okay, deep breath. When we take that Gaussian cloud idea and plug it into our log posterior scoring function from before, we get this equation. And I know, that looks like a monster. But here's the secret: you don't need to memorize this. The real magic isn't in this equation itself, but in how we can chop it down and simplify it. And this is where we get to the absolute heart of this whole thing. It turns out that depending on what we assume about the shape of those data clouds, we get completely different kinds of boundaries between them. Let's walk through three classic scenarios. Let's start with case one, the simplest possible world you can imagine. We're going to assume that the data clouds for our apples and oranges are both perfect circles. And not just that, but they're the exact same size. They can be in different places, sure, but their shape is identical.
Now, because of that simple assumption, watch what happens to our big, scary equation. All the really complicated parts, the ones that describe the shape of the cloud, are now the same for every single class. And if they're the same for everyone, they don't help us discriminate, right? So we can just toss them out. And we're left with this much friendlier, much simpler formula.
And here's the real kicker. Look closely at that simplified equation. Our input data, the x, is no longer being squared or doing anything complicated. And whenever that's the case, it means the boundary where the score for apple exactly equals the score for orange is just a straight line.
Let's make this real with some numbers. Let's say the center of our apple cloud is at coordinates 1, 2, and the orange cloud is at 4, 5. We plug those numbers into our simple formulas, and we get a unique scoring rule for each class. Then, to find the boundary, we just set those two scores equal to each other. A little bit of high school algebra later, and we get a beautiful, simple equation for a line. x1 plus x2 equals 6. Anything on one side is an apple, anything on the other is an orange. Done.
Okay, let's level up. Welcome to case two. What if our data clouds aren't perfect circles? What if they're a little squished or stretched into ellipses? The key assumption here is that they are still identical to each other. Same size, same shape, same tilt. And guess what? Just like before, because that shape term, that covariance matrix sigma, is exactly the same for all our classes, the most complicated part of the original equation, the part that squared our x, we can drop it again. It's the same for everyone, so it's useless for telling them apart. And this is a really powerful moment. Get this, even though our data clouds themselves are more complex, they're ellipses now, the boundary separating them is still just a simple straight line. This is such a popular and important method that it has its own name, linear discriminant analysis, or LDA for short.
All right, time for the final boss, case 3. What happens if we throw all our simplifying assumptions out the window? In this case, we let every class have its own completely unique data cloud. The apple cloud could be short and fat. The orange cloud could be long, skinny, and tilted at a totally different angle. Anything goes.
So, think about it. Since the shape, the covariance, is now unique for every class, we can't just cancel out that messy, squared term from our original equation anymore. It has to stay. So what on earth happens to our boundary when we have to keep that part of the equation in the mix?
We get quadratic boundaries. We're not talking about straight lines anymore. The line that separates our classes can now be a curve. It could be an ellipse, a parabola, or a hyperbola. And this makes total sense, right? If you have more complex data shapes, you need a more flexible, curvy boundary to separate them. And this method, very appropriately, is called quadratic discriminant analysis, or QDA.
So after going through all 3 of those cases, what's the big picture here? What's the main thing to remember? It really all boils down to a simple trade-off between straight lines and curves.
This table sums it all up perfectly. Look, if you assume the data clouds are identical, doesn't matter if they're perfect circles or ellipses, you end up with a linear boundary. That's LDA. But the moment you assume each class has its own unique shape, bam, you get a quadratic boundary. That's QDA.
And this is the most crucial point of the whole explainer. Your choice between a simple model like LDA and a more flexible one like QDA really depends on one single thing. What do you believe is true about the shape of your data? Your assumption directly determines the tool you're going to use.
And that leaves us with a final, really interesting question to think about. A fancy complex curve seems like it would always be more powerful, right? But what if it's too powerful and it gets confused by the noise in your data? A simple straight line might be less flexible, but maybe it's more reliable. Deciding when a simple model is actually better than a complex one, well, that's one of the biggest questions in all of machine learning.